Welcome back to the ATH Materia Medica series. I'm Dr. Larry Malerba, and today I'll be talking about tuberculinum. This will be the first nosode that I've featured in this series. A nosode is a homeopathic remedy prepared from diseased tissue or from a product of diseased tissue. Tuberculinum is a nosode prepared from the pus obtained from a tubercular abscess. Tuberculosis is a disease associated with a bacterium called Mycobacterium tuberculosis. There are several different tuberculinum remedies in the original literature, but the tuberculinum that I'll be talking about is sourced from human tuberculosis. So let's get started.
Although there is some confusion in the literature about the original source of proving information for tuberculinum, much of the information that I'll be discussing comes from clinical experiences that have been repeatedly verified by many practitioners over decades of time. But before we talk about the remedy, let's talk about the tubercular miasm. We speak of the tubercular miasm as a broad hereditary influence on the health of certain individuals. It's a predisposition towards certain symptoms or types of illnesses that can be inherited from an individual or individuals from prior generations who had contracted and suffered from tuberculosis. On the physical level, one such tendency passed down the generations is a susceptibility toward developing respiratory infections. On the psychological level, the tubercular miasm can manifest as a need for constant change in order to break free from the perceived monotony of daily living. With that in mind, let's discuss the tuberculinum mentals. We can surmise from numerous documented tuberculinum cases that the typical person who needs this remedy suffers from an inner feeling of discontentment. The routine of daily life is almost intolerable to the tuberculinum type. Tuberculinum is easily bored by everyday humdrum reality. In the homeopathic books, this boredom is referred to as ennui. This inner discontent tends to translate into a feeling of a lack of fulfillment. This in turn drives tuberculinum to seek fulfillment through a variety of novel experiences. Hence, we often observe a need for constant change. When there's no outlet through which to express this need for change or through which to seek fulfillment, this can ultimately lead to feelings of frustration and irritability. We see this especially in children who have little control over the daily events of their lives. Teenagers and adults, on the other hand, have more freedom and opportunity to seek new experiences. While the tuberculinum child may be frustrated and angry, the teenager or adult may engage in a variety of thrill-seeking activities. They are adventurous and they love new experiences. They are passionate, poetic, and romantic, and often have a desire to travel the world. Some tuberculinums are worldly cosmopolitan types. They wish to live life to the fullest. Many seek to quench their thirst for excitement by engaging in risky behaviors. There's a tendency to flirt with danger. Teenagers love to do stunts on their skateboards or snowboards. Some adults are interested in bungee jumping and even skydiving. We even see this in young kids, many of whom can be described as daredevils. They're the opposite of cautious. A young boy may hurtle down a steep hill on his bicycle with reckless abandon, unconcerned about the possibility of injury. We may even see this in the young child who repeatedly escapes from his crib, unperturbed by the fact that he may fall in the process. These are the kids who are climbers. No amount of child-proofing the home seems sufficient to keep them from getting into trouble. Unlike the typical kid who can burst into tears when he falls and injures himself, the tuberculinum child is usually unfazed. He just gets right up and tries all over again. Most tuberculinum types work hard and play hard. in order to fill the void created by that inner sense of discontentment. There's an interesting parallel between the old medical terminology used for tuberculosis patients and the behaviors of some tuberculinum types. Tuberculosis patients used to be referred to as consumptives because TB is a disease that involves weight loss and bodily wasting, as if the person is being consumed by the disease. We see a similar consumptive tendency in tuberculinum types, who burn the candle at both ends with little regard for their physical and mental well-being. When deprived of an outlet for their need for change, tuberculinum children especially can become extremely difficult. These children are among the most disobedient and defiant of all remedy types. They embody the very definition of oppositional defiant disorder. They are intensely willful. They're strong-willed and cannot be forced to do anything that they don't want to do. Tuberculinum is the most stubborn and obstinate of all remedies. These are the kids who will not relent. They often do not respond to discipline. They're indifferent to reprimand and will throw temper tantrums if they don't get their way. I feel bad for the parents of these children because I know that all the coaxing, cajoling, warning, and scolding in the world is unlikely to get their children to behave themselves. They will simply disobey and then grin about it. Unlike hyoscyamus, tuberculinum types don't misbehave to get attention. They simply do what they want to do with little regard for the consequences. They're bold and fearless. When the occasional parent does find the strength to push back hard enough, the tuberculinum child will usually throw a tantrum. And believe me, these are not your run-of-the-mill tantrums. Oftentimes, they're long-lasting tantrums that can persist indefinitely, at least until the child gets its way. They can last for 10, 20, 30 minutes or even longer. They'll throw themselves on the floor. They can intentionally break things and throw things in anger. I found a rubric in one repertory that reads, desires to break his parents' most prized possession, and tuberculinum was the only remedy listed. Some will bang their heads on the floor or against a wall in anger. We also see head banging and other compulsive or ritualistic behaviors, especially in autistic kids who need tuberculinum. Most parents will understandably relent in the face of so much resistance. They become worn down and find ways to let their children have what they want so as not to provoke any more meltdowns. It's relatively easy to spot these kids in my office. The child quickly becomes fixated on something in my room that he wants, like a book, for example. He goes to grab it, and the parent makes an attempt to stop him. The child momentarily hesitates and waits until the parent resumes talking to me, after which he simply goes right back after the book. At that point, I may raise my voice with a firm no. He hesitates again, but stares directly at me and keeps his hand on the book, but he doesn't pick it up. In spite of the fact that I'm a complete stranger to this child, he waits for his opportunity, and when I'm distracted, he tries again to get his hands on the book. Sometimes it doesn't go that far, and the child simply throws a tantrum. When the parent takes the tuberculinum child to the supermarket, for example, he wants to grab everything within his reach. The parent has no other option than to keep the child seated in the grocery cart. These are the same kids who will unceremoniously and forcefully take things directly from the hands of other kids at school, and they will continue to do it even after the teacher has told them not to. Now, we can see these behaviors in a wide spectrum of tuberculinum children, ranging from intelligent and precocious kids to hyperactive kids to mentally retarded and even autistic children. At their worst, they can be malicious and destructive. They're capable of being abusive and vindictive, and it can be a deliberate type of meanness. Tuberculinum lists in the repertory under cruelty to animals. These are the kids who think it's funny to kick the dog or to throw the cat down the stairs. These are the teenagers who will blow up a frog with a firecracker just for fun. Okay, now let's talk about tuberculinum fears. Although tuberculinum has very few fears, there does tend to be a distinct fear of dogs. There may also be a fear of cats, and sometimes a clear dislike or hatred of cats. And oftentimes there can be an allergy to cat hair. Otherwise, tuberculinum is relatively fearless. Most tuberculinum types are bold and unafraid. Okay, that's it for the mentals. Now let's talk about the tuberculinum generals and physicals. First off, the tuberculinum body type tends to be tall and lean. Another identifying physical feature is pectus excavatum, which means that the chest is narrow and the breastbone sinks into the chest, thus making the chest look hollowed out. Additional clues for tuberculinum include long, fine eyelashes and the presence of hair along the spine in children. This is a milder manifestation of tuberculinum's tendency toward midline birth defects. This includes defects like cleft lip, cleft palate, tongue tie, and hypospadias. Note that syphilinum also has a similar midline defect tendency. Although these physical characteristics can point to tuberculinum, it's important to realize that many cases will not have any of these features. Now, generally speaking, tuberculinum tends to be chilly. Tuberculinum is bothered by cold, damp weather and is worse with changes of weather and worse before storms. Conversely, it's better from warm, dry weather. Tuberculinum is also better from open air and has a desire for open air. It's worth noting that many of the old TB sanitariums were located in the mountains, where it was believed that the fresh air of the pine forests was beneficial for the patients. Due to its high protein content, milk was often recommended for these patients as a dietary measure to counteract their wasting tendency. What's interesting about this bit of allopathic history is that it directly correlates to our homeopathic knowledge of tuberculinum's modalities and food preferences. Tuberculinum is known to be better in the mountains, especially where there are pine forests. And the one most common tuberculinum craving is milk, especially cold milk. Tuberculinum is the biggest milk drinker in our Materia Medica. These are the kids or adults who will drink a quart or more of milk per day. Given the choice, these kids will choose milk even over soda. On the other hand, many tuberculinum kids are genuinely allergic to milk. Many modern parents are quick to eliminate dairy from their kids' diets, even though there may not be any actual milk allergy. So don't be fooled by this. It may take some investigating in order to determine whether there is a true milk allergy or not. In addition to milk, the homeopathic literature frequently references tuberculinum's desire for smoked meats. In my experience, I believe that this is more accurately characterized as a desire for cured meats. Tuberculinum loves fatty, salty, cured meats like bacon, ham, pepperoni, and salami. In addition, many tuberculinum kids like hot dogs. They also like other fatty and salty foods. And lastly, the main dessert preference of tuberculinum is ice cream. Now, in terms of physical symptoms, tuberculinum is prone to developing a wide range of both acute and chronic respiratory conditions. This includes frequent colds, acute coughs, chronic coughs, ear infections, bronchitis, asthma, and even pneumonia. Oftentimes, there may be swollen glands accompanying these conditions. Tuberculinum tends to catch cold easily, especially when exposed to cold air or to a draft of air. It's not unusual for a cold to linger and to lead to a chronic cough. Think of tuberculinum in cases of asthma that are triggered by catching cold, but are also ameliorated by open air. Tuberculinum is a remedy for recurrent fevers. It's also indicated for allergies that affect the respiratory system. Sometimes we see a family history of tuberculosis in prior generations, but this is not a necessary condition for prescribing tuberculinum. Additional clues that point to tuberculinum include night sweats, bruxism or grinding of the teeth, and ringworm. Tuberculinum is also a remedy for childhood eczema, and it's also a remedy for astigmatism, which is a curvature of the cornea or lens of the eye. And finally, tuberculinum can be a remedy for developmental delay in children. In such cases, there can be delayed dentition, and the child may be thin or emaciated in spite of an adequate appetite. You may recall that this is also the case with Natrium muriaticum. The tuberculinum child tends to sleep in the genupectoral position. In other words, it sleeps on the knees with the knees tucked against the chest and the rear end sticking up in the air. One more clue is that the child may have a tendency to bang the head or to bore the head into a pillow or into the bed. Okay, now let's finish up with some remedy relationships. Tuberculinum has similarities to and should be compared with silica, which is tall and thin, notoriously obstinate, and prone to respiratory infections. Phosphorus is also tall and lean, prone to respiratory problems, and can have a thirst for cold milk. Calc phos is discontented and irritable, desires to travel, and has food desires similar to tuberculinum. Basilinum is also a tubercular nosode, and one of its main indications is ringworm. And finally, tarantula often presents as a highly athletic, hyperactive daredevil type. Okay, I hope you found this discussion of tuberculinum helpful. Please subscribe to the All Things Homeopathy channel, and that way you can get notifications about new videos as soon as they become available. Until then, thanks for watching, and may the vital force be with you.